Well, good morning once again, Frank Marrero.
And good afternoon to you,
How are you?
transcontinental that we are.
So we are now in our third session, but really our second one on the essay that you wrote.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you if you're ready to continue with the essay on crucial
Right.
clarity.
Absolutely. The best is yet to come.
So for those who aren't familiar and just dropping in, my name is Arita with B-Zone, and I'm speaking with Frank Marrero in Berlin, who is a devotee of Arita Samraj.
Duh.
And so you are also a very prolific author and quite aware of the depth of the Greek tradition and also Adida's wisdom teaching. So I want to continue on with the essay that you wrote, A Crucial Clarity, which is part of an essay in a book that you're putting out soon, Nothing Makes Me Happy. And so I want to start with a part of your essay. So your paragraph says, let me say that no one has ever really grown up because it was another good idea. The transition to real maturity is not one blossom replacing another or an easy morphing of one stage into the next. So this is what most people believe, that you just grow up and naturally you will grow from childhood to adolescence to manhood, that you just have a natural progression.
Like I said, it's just not just you blossoming from one thing to the next. Some stages do, just like you come to rest in the body, and in that rest, your feeling emerges, and then you go from the first stage to the second. But the transition from adolescence to adulthood doesn't just kind of morph from one to the next, the fullness of one
You mean
becoming
when
the
you reach
beginnings of
21 and you can vote or drink, you don't just become a man or get drafted
exactly.
or join the army and get a gun? You're not just a man?
No, it's not an easy transition. In fact, it's the transition that we're all struggling with historically as well. So that's one of the other reasons this is hard to see. This is another reason that the ocean or the water that we as fishes are in, we can't see it because it is the cultural milieu. It is the historical moment. We're in an adolescent waters, and we don't see that in fact, as is often the case, people who go beyond the norm are called crazy, because they're not fitting in the regular pattern as everybody else. So, um, but this transition has a uniqueness, and that what's required is a radical revulsion of the pain I is causing, the pain that you're causing from your but it's that's structurally in place by adolescence, because as remember, adolescence is the capacity to is seen in the capacity to abstract yourself and see something objectively, and then you're suddenly a subject with all kinds of subjective feelings. All that is a nice tool, but it's become a worldview. And but the, there's another piece of that is easily seen, is that when you're not only abstracted from objective things, you're even abstracted from yourself. And not only does that create a kind of angst and separativeness and terrible, trapped inside the mind, you also become almost automatically manipulative. You No, even to yourself, you manipulate others, you manipulate the world. The capacity for abstractions makes manipulators out of us all, and our selfishness makes liars of us all, as he says. So, this capacity for capacity, this chokehold of a constant manipulation or sensitivity to being manipulative, you eventually realize this ain't it. You're not going to be happy. But if you could manipulate the world perfectly, you would still not be happy. So there's a radical revulsion and a conversion. You say deeply, I don't want to live this way. I do not want to live in a manipulative stance to everything and everyone and even myself. That conversion is required. You have to say no to the previous state and 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 open and invoke the next stage. So that's different. The radical reversion or conversion from self, which is adolescence, is all about being a strong self, being your own authentic voice, and be done with that mountain and yield beyond that, invoke beyond that, turn out of yourself. And fortunately, we have the great master Arita to, as an example, the supreme advantage, in fact, to forget ourselves in adoration. So that's another point we'll get to. But the point I wanted to make is we have to be converted from the manipulative and abstract hell of adolescence. We have to, it's an explicit conversion.
Well, let me finish you with the essay. What you said is quite, it requires, from my point of view, a lot of unpack, a lot
Sure.
to unpack, because you
Yeah,
speak.
implies so much. Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of to what you said. I mean, I mean, I really just have to say for myself, I'm dumb and dumber. So I'm saying biologically there's this adaptation and this social adaptation, but you're bringing this into a much greater understanding of not only the individual, but the social dimension, the political dimension, the cultural dimension, and the cosmic dimension. And you're also assuming that some people aren't going to be happy with being an adolescent, and your insight to your own manipulative behavior is going to, give you a comeuppance, and you're going to make a conversion and somehow make a revulsion to a greater wisdom. But there's an awful lot of people who are quite happy being an asshole or an adolescent or somebody who thinks
Or
they're.
just building themselves, which they should be doing. I mean,
Well, we're assuming
this is the obsession. This is the modern obsession. Be your own voice, be your own power, be your own understanding. Be your own person and don't need gurus, et cetera, et cetera. Right. You do have to stand in your own field of responsibility. You do have to stand in your own ground. Yes.
Well, I mean, Jordan Peterson is probably the most well-known voice of asking, particularly men, to grow up.
Yeah.
And what he is saying to the culture, and he is not just some fly-by-night guy. He's
Brilliant
a
guy.
major influence in the worldview of people today. And he's basically saying, just grow up, because a lot of people are not in the adolescent phase from his point of view. They're in the childish phase.
Mm-hmm.
They're in a dependent phase. They're still with mommy. They're still hanging around with mommy.
Sing it, Jordan. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're jumped way beyond Jordan Peterson's voice
Although one of his great calls is a call for responsibility. That's one of
right.
his strengths. It's not just a responsibility for not being a child. It's responsibility in general, which is the call for responsibility does harmonize the life, which is the foundation whereby we can begin to invoke what is greater than self, seeing the coastline from the outer space, as it were.
But at the present moment, in this particular adolescent period in history here, he is seen as a visionary and a person who is a leader in thought. Same with Sam Harris and other people like him. So
Yeah, and I agree. They're really they're exemplary in many ways, no doubt. Good things to say.
with your essay, we're going to talk a little bit about the transition from adolescence to adulthood, which necessitates a conversion, what you refer to as a revulsion. But that conversion is based on something you've seen about yourself.
Right.
right? And what you're pointing to is not only you're lying, as you point to, you're lying to yourself, you're not truthful to yourself, but you're not truthful to others. And so then, therefore, that truth, you want to coin it into a manipulative way, but you're basically using your sense of self to get what you want or to make other people do your bidding or whatever. So
Absolutely.
there's a
And there's
whole
a place,
game.
and there's a place for that. It's
Well,
just
I mean,
small.
that's the way most people are today, meaning that although people are quite pleasant to one another in most cases, there's a backstory to what it is
What's
that
in
they're
it for me? Well, look out for number one.
right, 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 right. So to mature, and I want to continue with your essay.
Mm-hmm.
So to
Mm-hmm.
mature beyond the mentality and the pains of abstraction, we must acutely suffer from our own form of
Mm.
narcissism.
Yes.
So without this sense of dissatisfaction, however you want to point to it, or the pain that you suffer individually or the pain you cause other people, nobody's going to make a move to a full growth. What you're saying, just to adulthood.
Right.
This is not just getting married and having a car and a house. This is much greater than what you're speaking about, adulthood.
Right on.
So can anybody do that on their own? Meaning that I'm just going to stop doing this and all of a sudden I'm going to make a new turn of the wheel here and become responsible and convert myself?
Yeah, exactly. That as we've talked about in the last session, this is not something you do. Adolescence, to achieve adolescence, that's something you do. Take responsibility, develop your own will, develop your own power, all, come to your own authentic voice. That is something you are participate in and have something to do, achieve. You climb the mountain. Adolescence can be seen as the climbing of a mountain for many reasons. First of all, for one of the primary requirements is to develop a clear and consistent and strong sense of focus. That's required, and something you do in some sense. Um, if you could isolate it out, but you don't fall in love by yourself. Let's just let me make it really simple. You fall in love with someone else, and to do that, you have to get over yourself. So it's good to make yourself and be strong and all that stuff, but then that's just the holy jumping off place whereby you fall in love with the happiness that comes from achievement and things and all the things I wants. That's the left-hearted, as it is said in the traditions and with Arita. What we're now going to is actual relationship. And to be in actual relationship, you have to get over yourself. Ask any married couple. You have to get over yourself. You don't fall in love by yourself. You don't achieve love. You have to give yourself up. So to live as love, to live in love, this is rare. And it's not something adolescents do, achieve. It is a graceful process. And can I do it? No, I cannot, so to speak. And in fact, and in truth. Um, so, but people, even adolescents, recognize that love is the way, love is the right um, thing they want to be involved in. But that's not something you can do, as Arita says in that poem. When I turn toward the heart, before I understand adolescence, I stand in a field of loneliness. Look at all the people, and I hope every one of your listeners can tell you many of the many times they have sworn that they would just continue to love and continually fail. That's not something you do. There's
Right.
another process beyond self.
I'm following your essay here.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned Jordan Peterson, and the essay that falls down from what I was reading earlier. It says, one more implication of the adolescent or the separative one is a shadow side.
Mhm.
And it is as if we're a prison, not only in the alienation and abstraction, but also in the manipulative stance. So at some point in time, you really have to come up to the place. I'm kind of, if I understand you correctly, that you have to come up with your own limitation. You have to come up, you have to see something about yourself to see what you're up to drop it and to allow that what you were referring to, something greater, or allow something to enter into you that you can't manufacture on your own.
That's right. You find yourself within a much greater ocean than the capsule of energy you thought you were. I mean,
And
you have to suffer your own suffering. I think it's called the first noble truth in some circles. Yeah, Dukkha, you must know.
that transition is just not you as that separate individual makes. It's actually dropping the that whole persona because this is the mechanism of transitions to different levels, if I'm not
That's right.
mistaken, is
Yeah,
that you
this
don't.
is a different kind of self-understanding. Self-understanding in normal modern psychological terms is I understand how my mother affected me, my father, my culture, my et cetera, so my time, my history, my gender, blah, blah, blah. That's normal self-understanding. We're talking about something in a bigger sphere. You see that what you do all together and you suffer it. And that is, you see what self, how the different self makes. I mean, let's be perfectly honest. This is divinity. This is the very substance of existence, Satchitananda. Is this is joy? This, and we are adding something to it that makes it so that we don't experience this as the joy that it is. That's not something you do. That's something you find yourself inherently within. Usually it's given to you. And anyone who reads in the word and gazes upon the person of a God man such as Arita will naturally be given that gift. Who sees I? Who sees your selfishness? Love. And love is the nature of consciousness. Love bliss is what consciousness feels like. So, and at first you just have to suffer it. It's painful. It's a fire, but that is reality. And that is not I. I don't do that. I I find I by grace, by the grace of the prior and natural state, it's self-evident inherently, intrinsically. Not I doing it, not the guy that makes the mountain, which climbs the mountain. So to go out of the guy that climbs the mountain or achieves adolescence, you have to suffer the limitations of that position. Who sees that? That's given to you by love's grace. And then you start moving in a different way, not to climb another mountain, not to be on an adventure to the bottom of the ocean, God rest their souls, etc. You the adventure is over at that point, and you start giving yourself up slowly at first, ordinarily for starters usually, but you have to become a servant, not another equal. Live as a servant, live for others, live outside yourself, not looking out for number one. I tell you that from my padded cell.
So you say the maturity of adolescence here.
Yeah,
All right. It's not just the abandonment of your own effort. There's the maturity of adolescence,
right,
is served in the discernment of what is harmonious, moral, and true. Then we
right,
can apply our strengthened will to conform our behavior and lives to that harmony. The discernment for one, our task for harmony and true morality is mature when it applies to the will in a steady and realistic manner that is neither too loose nor too tight, just like
right,
tuning a stringed instrument.
right,
In the words of Mae West, I'm all for restraint, just so long as it doesn't go too far.
right. Good old May.
Right.
Yes, the mature adolescent is has great discernment. That which began as don't tell me anything, I'm going to figure it out myself to doubt, to, I'm doubting everything. I don't believe in anybody. That grows to a sword of viveka, a sword of vijna, a sword of discrimination that even cuts itself, even knows when to lay down doubt, the discriminative sword. It's vijna maya kosha, or the capacities for beautiful discernment that can even cut itself so that you can also lay it down. You have to build it, but then you can even lay that down. You see what it needs to be done, and what needs to be done is to bring the life into a harmony that makes one trustable, at peace, in service, and trustably in service. And then there's an integration, a it's not integral like people like to mentally think, oh, I'm integrated with everything, although that's fine. But a true integration. And when the body mind complex, strong in will, strong in focus, is integrated into this peaceful trustableness, heart oriented trustableness, then there is capacity for reception, really great capacity. That's the beginning of the transition out of adolescence. You start living in a not just in a greater whole. You start living in divinity, and that's why, as we talked about last time, the transition as described by the Orphic story of Dionysus, Dendrite to Dionysus, that happens via Rhea, the great goddess, or what they call the secret women's mysteries. You yield, and you are infused with baptism.
Well, you pointed out here, so obviously to grow out of adolescence is not another willful achievement. The ancient Orphic story of the development phases of Dionysus, the god of ecstasy, sheds great insight into the adolescent to adult transition. In his adolescent, which is Latin for nurturing phase,
Mhm.
Dionysus was known as Dendrite, living in the forest with
Nysa, yes.
Nysa, and developed the capacity for pleasure, enjoyment, and achieving every ordinary goal. When he was fully nurtured in these, then Zeus's mother, Rhea, initiated him into the secret woman's mysteries, which transformed him into the god of Nysa,
Nysa.
Dionysus. Let us note that Rhea means flow, like in rheostat, diarrhea,
Diarrhea. Also rhythm, flow,
the great
which
goddess,
is
the mother of
right.
Zeus.
Now, there's a common popular thing talking about flow states. This is not, there's flow states, which is in the second stage where you learn to dance, where you learn to sing, where you learn to perform tricks, where you do athletics even. There's a flow. That's personal flow, I would say. I could characterize it. And you do have to learn how to kick out the jams, and no doubt about it. Yahoo! Uh, but and we need to be able to do that readily in some sense. Not like we're not the muses are not at our command by no means, but we do have to learn how to let go and be strong in that. That's one flow state that the people talk about now. This is another order of magnitude. This is the great flow. This is the mother of even Zeus, the great goddess. This is Shakti. This is Shaktipat. This is love's baptism. That's not just a flow state. That's grace incarnate or grace infusing. So I just want to make that distinction.
Well,
People nowadays don't talk about that.
well, I want to tell you this, what you're referring to with flow state is not something small. This is a major, like uh,
This is spirit
transition that,
baptism. This is spirit baptism.
but in the
That's not,
culture,
yeah,
in the culture,
that's not so common. Flow states can be common. Spirit baptism is uncommon. So that's the transition. That's the transition. The spirit baptism, true surrender. And so that's what transitions the adolescent to adulthood. On the basis of the integrity of the harmonized adolescent, the capacity for reception is clear.
well, I
And
want to
then
tell you, you don't have
it
to get into
comes.
Jamie Wheel or Stealing Fire or any of these things. I want to tell you, people have used this in the same voice that you're saying about turning it into the mature sense of what you're saying. People are using this flow state, as you point to in a second stage development,
Right.
as a metaphysical state,
Yeah,
as a
it's
as
an
a
ordinary, right. That's a confusion.
well, I mean, it's quite pervasive. People
Oh, it's
are
absolutely pervasive. That's why the quandary of understanding adolescence. This is not a common understanding.
so let me just turn this into the moment of this time, this 2023, this time, not 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 in the 2023 time, where all this stuff that you're speaking about, which has been given to the culture, the wisdom has been given to the culture, the books of Arita, the what you're steeped in here has been given out, and people have read all this information, not just from Arita, but from every other school about transitions through
Hmm.
psychedelics, through opening, through whatever. These concepts, this flow state, this it's it's all here now, and we're going to go with it, has been turned into a particular philosophy of today's world.
Right.
And so you're saying that this is really a very low interpretation of this magnitude of what it is that you're speaking.
Wonder why that would be.
Because I can sit and listen. I'm going to use Jamie. Jamie Wheel is a very well-known person, and he's very
I know Jamie.
articulate. Yeah,
I like
yeah,
Jamie.
I do too. But I can be seduced by his verbal and
Acuity is great.
and poetic and charismatic presentation, and in wanting to know more about this flow state that is seemingly outside of time, outside of it's an ecstatic vision. So I want to just discriminate between, let's say I'm looking at the screen, I'm here at this level and you're at this level above me on the screen. So we could be speaking about the same thing, but I could be doing it at this level and
Mhm.
you're addressing something at a higher adult level where I'm still in an adolescent level.
Or
But
pre-adolescent flow state. I mean, the second stage of life is fulfilled by flow. That is one of the signs of its fulfillment. It's the capacity for flow state. You got to be able to dance your brains out. You got to be. That's what you. That's as an example. Maybe dancing's not your thing. You got to be able to play the music or go for the walks in the woods and let your feelings soar. That's second stage. That's the requirement for the fullness of that stage. I'm talking about something different,
Yeah, big time.
big time. This makes you into an adult. This makes you into a servant. After you have your great flow state, are you then a servant and live in the fire of divinity if you're not? That's it. This is different. This is not flow state. If flow state doesn't set you on fire in love, baptized, washed,
Well, let me just share with
divine.
you, but this is what people are doing. They do have a breakthrough.
Absolutely, you have to.
Okay, but let me finish. They do have a
Mhm.
breakthrough, and they break out of their own confinement, and they see the larger picture. They see that there is something greater than, but they come back and they realize, oh, I don't live for myself anymore. I'm going to live for the other person. I'm going to live for the world. I'm going to become the bodhisattva. I'm going to become the one who's going to be the social kind of helper.
Sure, that's right on.
But see, that, but you're bringing it outside of this self and other. You're bringing into a transcendental kind of understanding. You're not just saying, yes, I see my suffering. I've learned that I'm a limitation. I'm manipulative. I've done whatever it is, and now I can open my heart and I can see the world and its flow and its beauty and its wonder. But then, at the same way, I'm subtly going to come up with another identity, like I have an understanding, and I'm going to now sell it or give it or live it to you. I want you to understand something. There's a whole tricky game here in terms of transitioning from the flow
Well, that's
state.
one of the great things about the adolescent. He or she must develop discrimination, and
Well, this is
this is
up on the other part of the essay, which we've just went through.
mhm.
We didn't talk a little bit about discrimination, which is really key in understanding these concepts, these ideas, because these flow between childhood, adolescence, adulthood. They're just concepts, they're ideas. Anybody can
Right,
grab an idea. I go into a grocery
dime
store,
a
I see a
dozen.
mother talking to a 2-year-old boy about concepts. Do we think we have enough money in this, whatever? Or read the labels. But these are just concepts. And so people are living in this kind of idealized world, in this kind of conceptual mind.
Well, let's go back to the dendrite to Dionysus transition, which it's the baptism of Rhea, the Shaktipat, living in baptism. That makes you into a god. Dionysus. Dendrite was an adolescent. Dionysus is the god of ecstasy.
Yeah, but when you're dropping in on Shakti, you're talking about Shakti. This is not just like, oh, I had a sexual experience here.
No, not
This
that kind
is
of Shakti. It's good Shakti. We never turn it down. But that's not what I'm talking about either. This is the great flow. Arita also talks about there's two kinds of feelings. There's the I feel angry, I feel so your own personal feelings, right? And then there's the feeling at infinity. And that's not because you've really just expanded your feeling to like a balloon that's getting bigger and bigger into your infinity. That's not it either. That's still I feeling. There's a feeling that is the substance of everything. And yes, there's obviously some play between those two, but in the same way that there is personal feeling and the feeling of existence itself.
well,
In
this
that
is
same way, there's feeling. I mean, there's flow, which is personal, and there's flow that is the feeling of existence itself.
I'm going to jump here because this adulthood really is a full transition to spiritual life,
Absolutely.
meaning that
The real beginning. Mm-hmm.
this sense of me, this sense of identity, this sense of I'm my mind, I'm my feeling, I'm in control. This is really
In control.
I mean, we're fundamentally talking about an illusionary sense here. This is not a real me here. Yeah, I mean, there's this paradox we're speaking about, because this sense of you who do have to grow up and you do have to become individualized and you do have to become a persona. But if
Absolutely.
you but if you take that persona to be absolutely real, in itself real,
Or the goal.
right? But this is the foundation of all of this stuff. That's my mind, my feeling, my house, my wife, my
My
guard,
accomplishments.
my accomplishments,
My
my
experience.
yeah.
My
So
knowledge.
all of this me, my stuff really has got to be seen through. And this is what I'm getting a sense of, is where the true transition from adolescence, individuality, to mutuality, if you will, adulthood, is really has to
Yeah,
be,
there's mutuality. I mean, you can have, there's kinds of mutual, like you say, words can be tricky.
yeah.
And mutuality is one way of saying it, of course. And but I was reading some Martin Buber, yeah, a couple of days ago, and he had a great line: "When you come to thou, all things dissolve." And I just went, "Oh, there you go." And so there's no, you fall out of yourself. You're distracted from yourself. That big mountain that you built and made and everything, you forget it. So, and the fourth stage of life, the error of the fourth stage of life is that thou is still in duality. Fine, it's still great, and all things uh, lose their substantiveness in it, no doubt about it. So let's keep going. That we could. The paradoxes of all this are too mental. Let's
All right.
let's let's move on.
So the essay says, let me repeat, this transformation is not achieved. Indeed, it is not achievable by will. Instead of willful assertion, we willingly give ourselves over to the flowing, to the yielding. Now, the French word for give yourself over is surrender. Not only to be confused with the subjugation near the beginning of adolescence flow, surrender is found in the maturation of adolescence into adulthood, illuminating the pleasurable dendrite to Dionysus, Eleutherios transition via the divine flow yielding. Adidas Eleutherios pointed out, sacrifice is the bridge from pleasure to ecstasy. So I'm going to go to we're getting down to this poem I want to get you. The onset of adolescence makes us thoroughly allergic to anything that reeks of subjugation or control. Indeed, it is for good reasons that we insist on our own assertions. And I'm going to jump down. In this culture and time, subjugation and misunderstanding surrender is the anti-theme, or
Anathema.
anathema. The new understanding is necessary of how the transition out of adolescence is marked by discriminative intelligence and the submission to be controlled by wisdom. Let us not conflate subjugation and surrender, but to discriminate that one is passive and the other is active.
Right.
It's like love. Love is not something you achieve or will. You flow, you fall in love. You willingly give yourself to love. Understand this difference and so do not embrace yourself. Be free to fall in love. Give yourself to love.
Yeah.
There is a force of loneliness around my heart. It is not a mood that arises sometime in my life. It is a force, the power of the world itself. It is all that surrounds me, all that counters my desire. When I turn towards the heart, before I understand, I stand in the field of loneliness that sees all things. I look at all the worlds through the ring of power that draws around the brows. My heart becomes sorrowful, and I'm
I
afraid.
am afraid.
This is the
This is
crucial
the crucial
clarity of
clarity.
man. When he sees it, then he understands. He turns and draws in through the heart, like the string around a beaded sack, like a cord that holds his solid trousers up. He draws in with him,
He draws it with him in the heart.
and all things fall to nothing in a joy. This poem is from Arita's early writings, isn't it?
It's he released it in 1982.
Right.
But yes, I think it is. And but there's that Martin Buber's, when you come to thou, your things dissolve. When you go in, when you're in the heart, he draws it with him in the heart, and all things fall to nothing in a joy. Um, and the other line there, he looks at, back to the adolescent. He looks at all the world through a ring of power that draws around the power, draws around the brow. You know how we always go, oh, you have this sense that I got to be nice. That person's better than me. That person has more power than me. I'm looking up to someone, and then there's those people, and you look down on people. It's the adolescent naturally does that. That must be understood. It's the ring of power that draws around the brow. The the capacity to actually feel. My heart becomes sorrowful, and I am afraid. You see you see and confess the adolescent quandary, the dilemma, and you say it, you confess it freely. I know for myself, I after many decades of spiritual life, I finally came to the point where I could feel my own anxiety, and that was and nakedly, no excuses, no causes, no victim, and that capacity to actually feel prior to the mind. None of the little why and this isn't a justification. None of that. Just feel the fundamental anxiety that I am and am doing. That was, and here he describes it. I look at all uh, the world around me. The, my heart becomes sorrowful, and I am afraid. The ring of power. Back in the essay, there's that a paragraph on the early 19th century philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, who made as far as I'm concerned, brilliant uh, revelation of anxiety. And he's pointed out that time is an anxiety we add to presence, which is a great insight. And that's why we say past tense, present tense, future tense. It's a tension we add. Grasp, clutch, choke. Well, what is the origin of the word anxiety? It's from Latin anxious, almost exactly the same, but it's rooted in the word angere, meaning to choke. When anxiety doesn't happen to you, but you first have to just feel it nakedly, raw. When we grow strong, when we've grown strong enough as adolescents, so that we can nakedly, armless at last, feel our sorrow, our fear, and our anxiety with no excuses and nowhere to run. Then we see that's what beloved Arita calls listening. You feel without reaction. And as we get stronger and more adept at this, then we see that we're doing it. I see flashes of hearing. I'm doing it. And then as you see that you're doing it, you become the vessel where that can be received baptism. So this anxiety to me is key. It's a non-mental necessity. You have to become strong enough in order to feel, not feel like flow states. Feel fundamentally. Take your mind, whatever it's saying right now, and just kind of strip all the words away. What's the feeling? There's an anxiety. Is it love bliss? Then it's anxiety. To the degree that I can let that yes, and feel that without making judgments, without making insights, without anything, then I can actually feel. That's what's required. This is the crucial clarity. When he sees it, then he understands. He turns and draws it with him in the heart. And all things fall to nothing and joy. So there's your transition from adolescence. It's why I named the essay The Crucial Clarity. This is not flow state. This is a sobriety. It's a maturation of vulnerability and permeability, integration that is so sober that there's no armor. And this is the maturity that is of a strong adolescent. And that makes the ground, the space for the reception of spirit baptism. That's real transition to adulthood. That's the sacrifice, as Arita says. Sacrifice is the bridge from pleasure to ecstasy, from dendrite to Dionysus. So you sacrifice that mental apparatus, sacrifice those mental ideas, sacrifice yourself. Live for others. Be a servant, not an equal other. Equal others are what adolescents do. Live as a servant. And then all things fall to nothing and a joy. So, by the grace of Arita Samraj, I confess this. And it's still tough. I still have to encounter all the things of self, learn to feel. I'm still growing up. But I've begun to be an adult. I'm still 4 years old and 7 years old and 10 years old, punk asshole, 17, whatever. All the ages. But also I'm an adult. Because I've been broken. And my heart is broken in the most wonderful way.
I want to say, without the wisdom of Arita and what you're bringing, and I look around the room, so to speak, in the big room of the culture of the world, or people out there speaking the truth. His wisdom is so, in a way, so far beyond, but so present at the same moment, and surpasses or includes, not I don't mean discards anything, but includes all these other parts of the puzzle, so to speak. I just can't imagine people not paying attention more to his word and his person.
He's not an adolescent. This is an adolescent time. Everybody wants to know it, get it, use it. Everybody's an adolescent.
But this whole time, this fire that you're speaking about, or this dissatisfaction, is creeping into the world of everybody's little isolated island of security or insecurity or whatever. The world is shrinking.
Both. Yeah. He's pervading it. He's not an Arita is not an isolated enlightened individual.
Right.
Dead.
Well, this is what's so apparent today is the world is in an existential moment. This time is now unified time. Everybody's moment is the same moment, and it's the world moment. And this is one of the things that he's brought as a world teacher. He's speaking to this moment. He's speaking to this existential moment of not just your own adolescence, but the world's adolescence.
All the wars and natural horrors you have feared will be my very act. Right.
Right.
You know, 2,500 years ago, Isaiah of Deuteronomy talked about the coming age of a new kind of person. And he said, in those days, the rivers will run as bitter as wormwood, and the smoke will hang over all the cities. He didn't have a fucking crystal ball. That's not how his prophecy works. He had outgrown adolescence. And what does he understand about adolescence? It's manipulative. If the humans cover the earth in their adolescence, their manipulativeness will make us smoke over all the cities and the rivers will run as bitter as wormwood. He understood what adolescence is. That's that's how you see something 2,500 years away. You understand what it is to grow up. And you see that in all the details of what surrounds you. All you have to do is grow up. And history and prophecy become clear.
And so, if anything, what I hear you saying is not just this growth from childhood, adolescence into adulthood. You're actually making a call, his call, to growing up, to become
Absolutely.
a true citizen of the world in the full sense of that term. And I don't mean politically. I mean
No,
spiritually and
the word citizen is rooted in the word Shiva. Know that you die.
right.
That's the sobriety that's necessary. Then you're a citizen.
So I want to end this essay and also our discussion today with the call to become a full citizen. And thank you very, very much for what you've written. And
in the mood of the liberation and relief he gives. I don't care if anybody has anything to do with Arita personally. I don't get any stars on my chart. There's Dionysus had 4 names. Zagreus, Dendrite, Dionysus, Eleutherios. Eleutherios means liberator. Your feeling is freed. And I beg for the relief of God for everyone. It's liberating. And that's not like just in the same way that he is not an enlightened, a former alive enlightened person. He's not that. Just like you aren't separate. So to the degree that we can each take up our authentic confession, authentic sobriety, authentic growth, and authentic reception of baptism, which is unbelievably available. To the degree we can take up that, it's not just transforming to us, it helps this whole awful situation. So it's not just for you and me or him or a club membership, and none of that crap. We are not separate individuals, and to the degree we let go and release ourselves in this profundity, it's the relief of God, truly. And it doesn't just have implications for our own little personal salvation. It's necessary for us to survive as a whole. So, and your children and your grandchildren, and etc. And for the wonder of this world, this is not a personal event anymore.
right. right, right. So with that, I want to thank you very much again. And for our audience, I want to thank you for staying tuned and listening and watching. And if you have any comments, please give them at the bottom of our screen here, and we'll stay in touch.
All right. Thanks, Ed. Thanks.
Okay.